My daughter didn't come to me when the hospital called to tell her about my heart attack. Instead, her fiancé posted a photo with a cruel caption, "Finally, a day without the drama king." Enraged, I made one phone call and sold what they thought was theirs. Who's dramatic now? Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The beeping wouldn't stop. That steady mechanical pulse dragged me back from somewhere dark and weightless. My eyelids felt like sandpaper against my eyes as I forced them open. White ceiling tiles, the smell of disinfectant mixed with something metallic. Hospital. "Mr. Little, you're finally awake." A woman in scrubs leaned over me, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Professional smile, but her eyes held genuine warmth. The name tag read, "Teresa Nguyen, RN." "What happened?" My voice came out as a croak. There was something in my arm, an IV line snaking up to a bag of clear fluid. "Where am I?" "Columbus Community Hospital. You had a heart attack at work this afternoon." Teresa checked something on the monitor beside my bed, fingers dancing across buttons I couldn't see. "The paramedics brought you in around noon. You've been unconscious for about 2 hours." Heart attack. The words hit like cold water. I tried to sit up, but Teresa's gentle hand pressed me back down. "Easy now. You need to rest." She pulled up a chair beside the bed. "We called your daughter as listed in your emergency contacts." Thank goodness. Wendy would be here soon, probably pacing in the hallway with that worried frown she got whenever I so much as sneezed. She'd insist on staying the night, sleeping in that uncomfortable chair hospitals pretend are suitable for family members. She said she was busy and couldn't make it. The monitor's beeping seemed to skip. "What?" Teresa's professional composure flickered for just a moment. "We explained the situation, but she said she had other commitments today." "That's impossible." My chest tightened, and not from the heart attack. "She doesn't work Thursdays. Today's her day off. She spends it cleaning the house, doing laundry." The nurse's eyes softened with the kind of pity I'd seen directed at other people, never at me. "I'm sorry, Mr. Little. Sometimes family members react differently to medical emergencies. Shock affects people in various ways." Shock. Right. That had to be it. Wendy was probably at home right now, too panicked to drive safely. She'd always been nervous about hospitals, ever since her mother died in one 3 years ago. Maybe she was calling Jasper, asking him to drive her here. Maybe she was just scared. Could I gestured weakly toward the bedside table. "Could I get my phone?" Teresa hesitated, then reached into the drawer. "Just for a few minutes. You really should rest." The phone felt heavier than usual in my hands. Or maybe my hands were just weaker. The screen showed 17 missed calls from work, 4 from my friend Silas, but nothing from Wendy. Not even a text asking if I was okay. The number we called was current, right? Teresa stood, preparing to leave. "The one listed as your emergency contact?" "Yes." I stared at Wendy's contact photo, her laughing at last Christmas, wearing the red sweater I'd bought her. "That's definitely her number." Teresa paused at the door. "I'll be back to check on you in an hour. Try to get some rest, Mr. Little. Your body needs time to heal." The door closed with a soft click, leaving me alone with the steady beeping of machines and a growing hollow sensation that had nothing to do with my damaged heart. I looked at my phone again, thumb hovering over Wendy's name. She always answered on the second ring. Always. Maybe the hospital called the wrong number. Maybe there was some mistake in their system. Maybe. I pressed call. My finger shook slightly as it touched Wendy's name on the screen. The IV tugged at my arm when I shifted position, a sharp reminder of where I was and why. Ring 1, ring 2. She always picked up by now, usually with her cheerful, "Hi, Dad," that could brighten even my worst days. Ring 3, 4, 5. The call went to voicemail. Her voice, recorded months ago, sounded distant. "You've reached Wendy. Leave a message, and I'll get back to you." "Wendy, it's Dad." My voice was steadier than I felt. "I'm in the hospital. Columbus Community. Room 247. The doctors say I had a heart attack. Please call me back as soon as you get this." I hung up and immediately dialed again. Same result. Voicemail. This time I didn't leave a message. Instead, I opened my text messages, fingers fumbling across the screen. The IV made everything awkward, and my chest ached with each movement. Had heart attack. In hospital. Please call. Sent. The little check mark appeared, confirming delivery. I stared at it, waiting for the 3 dots that would show she was typing back. Nothing. Maybe her phone was on silent. Thursday was cleaning day. She always said the vacuum was too loud to hear anything. She could be upstairs, earbuds in, scrubbing the bathroom while listening to those crime podcasts she loved. She'd find the messages later, probably in an hour or two, and then she'd panic and rush over. But Wendy never put her phone on silent during the day. "What if there's an emergency with you, Dad?" she'd said just last month, when I'd suggested she take a break from the constant notifications. I typed another message. Please respond. Scared. The word scared looked small and pathetic on the screen, but it was honest. I sent it anyway. The minutes crawled by. I checked the message status. Delivered but not read. How is that possible? Wendy checked her phone constantly. Jasper always complained about it, said she was addicted to social media and couldn't put the thing down for 5 minutes. My chest tightened again, and the monitor's beeping quickened. I forced myself to breathe slowly, the way the cardiologist had taught me years ago during my first scare. Just anxiety. Perfectly normal after a heart attack. I scrolled through my contacts, looking for someone else to call. Silas would come, but he was probably at a property showing. My neighbor Jacqueline would be here in 10 minutes if I asked, but she'd want to know why my own daughter wasn't here first. Maybe I could call Jasper directly. He might know where Wendy was, might have a better explanation, but something stopped me. If Wendy wasn't answering my calls, there had to be a reason, and asking her husband about her whereabouts felt like crossing some invisible line. I opened Facebook instead. Wendy posted everything there: what she ate for breakfast, photos of their cat, complaints about the weather. If she was dealing with some crisis that kept her from answering the phone, she'd probably posted about it. Her last post was from Tuesday, a photo of homemade lasagna with the caption, "Trying a new recipe." 37 likes, including one from me. Nothing since then. No posts about emergencies, no status updates about being busy or having phone problems. Her profile looked exactly like it always did, except for the conspicuous silence over the past 2 days. I clicked over to Jasper's profile, something I rarely did. His posts were usually sarcastic memes or complaints about clients, but maybe he'd shared something that would explain why Wendy couldn't come to the hospital. His most recent post was from 2 hours ago. The timestamp on Jasper's post made my blood freeze. 1:47 p.m. Exactly the time I'd been rushed to the hospital, when the paramedics were loading me into the ambulance while my coworkers watched from the office parking lot. The photo showed 2 cocktail glasses on what looked like their kitchen counter. Fancy drinks with little umbrellas, the kind Wendy ordered when we went out for her birthday. Ice cubes catching the afternoon light streaming through their window. The caption read, "Finally, a day without the Drama King." I stared at the screen until my eyes watered. Read it again. Screenshot it with trembling fingers, though I wasn't sure why. Drama King. They were talking about me. Had to be. Who else could they mean? Wendy had never mentioned any other dramatic people in their lives. Her friends were all suburban moms who complained about school districts and shared recipes. The timestamp wouldn't lie. Posted at 1:47 p.m. when I was being loaded into an ambulance, when my heart had literally stopped beating for 37 seconds, according to the paramedic who'd briefed the emergency room team. While I was dying, my daughter and son-in-law were making cocktails and celebrating my absence. I scrolled down to see who had liked the post. Neighbors I'd helped with yard work. Wendy's college friends who'd always been polite to me at family gatherings. People who knew me, knew I was Wendy's father, and they were laughing along with this joke about the Drama King. How long had they been talking about me this way? How many conversations had happened behind my back, painting me as some burden they had to tolerate? The phone slipped in my sweaty palm. I caught it before it could fall, but my chest was burning now, a different kind of pain than the heart attack. This was deeper, spreading through my ribs like acid. The hospital had called Wendy, told her I'd had a heart attack, that I was unconscious, that her father might die, and she'd said she was busy. Because she wasn't busy. She was free. Free to make cocktails and post jokes about being rid of the Drama King. My hands found the screenshot I'd taken, zoomed in on those laughing emojis. Each one felt like a slap. Wendy had taught me how to use emojis. Spent 20 minutes last year showing me which ones meant what. The crying, laughing face means something is really, really funny, Dad. Really, really funny. My heart attack was really, really funny. I thought about every time I'd helped them out. The down payment on their house, $15,000 from my retirement savings. The car repairs I'd paid for when Jasper's freelance work dried up last winter. The weekly grocery runs when Wendy's back was bothering her. The countless times I'd dropped everything when they called. Dad, can you watch the cat while we're out of town? Dad, our sink is leaking. Can you fix it? Dad, we're short on the electric bill this month. And I'd done it all gladly, because that's what fathers do. That's what family means. But apparently, to them, I was just a drama king. Someone whose medical emergency was an inconvenience. Someone whose near-death experience was a reason to celebrate. The cocktail glasses in the photo looked expensive. Probably bought with money I'd lent them for groceries last month. I stared at the post until the words blurred together, until the afternoon sun slanting through my hospital window felt cold as winter. Drama King. Finally, a day without the Drama King. The monitor beside my bed registered my rising heart rate, but I barely heard its warning beeps. All I could hear was the echo of words I was never supposed to see, the truth I was never meant to know. They weren't coming, neither of them, and for the first time in my 68 years, I was completely, utterly alone. Drama King. The words echoed in my skull like a diagnosis I couldn't shake. I set the phone down on the hospital bed's side table, watching my hand tremble from more than just the medication. The IV tube swayed with each movement, a plastic reminder of how fragile everything had become. When had Wendy last called just to check on me? Not about money, not about some crisis that required my immediate attention or my wallet, just to ask how I was doing. I couldn't remember. The monitor's beeping seemed louder now, matching the rhythm of memories I'd been too naive to connect. 6 months ago, Wendy's voice on the phone, thick with tears. Dad, we're behind on rent. The landlord says we have 3 days or we're out. I know it's a lot to ask, but you're the only family we have left. $1,500. I'd driven to the bank that same afternoon. 4 months later, another call. Different crisis, same desperation. Jasper landed this amazing project, but the client won't pay until it's finished. We can't even afford groceries. Could you help us out, just until the money comes through? $800 for groceries that seemed to last exactly as long as every other month's groceries. My throat felt dry. I reached for the water cup beside the bed, noting how the plastic felt foreign against my lips. Everything in this place was foreign, sterile, designed for emergencies, like the emergencies that brought my daughter to my door with increasing frequency. You understand, right, Dad? Mom always said family comes first. That one was from 2 months ago. Wendy had been standing in my kitchen, her eyes red-rimmed, one hand resting on the counter where Sarah used to roll out pie dough. With Mom gone, we're all we have. She'd want you to help us. Using Sarah's memory like a credit card, I'd given them $1,200 that time, told myself it was what Sarah would have wanted. The most recent call came back with painful clarity. Last Tuesday, just 6 days ago. It's temporary, Dad, I promise. Once Jasper's business really takes off, we'll pay back everything. You know we're good for it. Good for it. Right. In 3 years of temporary help, I'd seen exactly $0 returned. But every month brought new temporary crises, new reasons why this time was different. This time was the last time. I pressed the heel of my palm against my forehead. The IV pulled slightly, sending a sharp reminder up my arm. How many times had I made excuses for them? How many red flags had I painted green with my own desperate need to believe my daughter still needed her father for something other than his bank account? The door opened and Teresa stepped in, checking her watch. How are we doing, Mr. Little? Fine, I said automatically. Just thinking. She moved to check the monitors, her presence somehow both comforting and distant. Professional care from a stranger, while my own family celebrated my medical crisis with cocktails and cruel jokes. Your daughter called the main desk about an hour ago, Teresa said, making notes on her tablet. Asked about visiting hours. My heart rate spiked, and the monitor betrayed me with its increased beeping. What did you tell her? That you were resting but stable. She seemed relieved. Teresa glanced at me with those kind eyes that had delivered too much bad news to too many families. She'll probably visit tomorrow. Tomorrow, when she'd play the part of the concerned daughter, ask all the right questions, maybe even bring flowers. The same flowers I'd probably end up paying for, one way or another. I thought about that coffee canister in my kitchen, the one where I kept emergency cash. Had she taken some of that too? The spare key I'd given her was for emergencies, I'd said. Medical emergencies, household disasters, times when she truly needed her father. Not for shopping trips while I fought for my life. The realization hit like a second heart attack. I needed to go home. I needed to see what else she'd taken, what other violations had occurred while I lay unconscious. Because if she'd felt comfortable enough to celebrate my hospitalization, what had she felt comfortable enough to steal? Teresa finished her checks and headed for the door. Try to rest, Mr. Little. Tomorrow will be a busy day with discharge paperwork. Discharge. Home. I waited until her footsteps faded down the hallway, then reached for the drawer where they'd put my wallet and keys. The taxi dropped me at the curb just before 10 the next morning. My house looked exactly the same from the outside. Same faded blue shutters, same mailbox tilting slightly to the left, same crack in the front walkway I'd been meaning to fix for months. But something felt different the moment I turned the key in the lock. The air inside held a faint trace of perfume that wasn't mine. Wendy's perfume, the expensive stuff she couldn't afford but somehow always wore. I set my keys on the hall table, the same spot I'd used for 23 years, and listened. The house felt empty now, but it hadn't been empty yesterday. Someone had been here, moving through my space, touching my things. The living room appeared normal at first glance. Same worn leather chair where I watched the evening news, same stack of engineering journals on the coffee table. But the antique coin collection I kept behind the World War II history books was gone. 3 generations of rare coins, including a 1909 penny my grandfather had given me when I was 12. My legs felt unsteady, whether from the heart attack or the discovery I couldn't tell. I made my way to the kitchen using the wall for support. The coffee canister sat on its usual shelf, but 3 inches to the left of where I always placed it. I opened the lid with shaking fingers. $200 missing from the $400 I kept for emergencies. She'd taken exactly half, probably thinking I wouldn't notice. Or maybe she didn't care if I noticed. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the canister's position, then another of the empty space behind the books. Evidence, an engineer's instinct to document problems before solving them. The study door stood slightly ajar. I never left it ajar. I pushed it open and went straight to my desk, where I kept important papers in the bottom drawer. The drawer wasn't fully closed, another detail I would never have missed under normal circumstances. Inside, my files had been rifled through with the casual efficiency of someone who knew exactly where to look. Birth certificates, insurance policies, investment statements. All there, but disturbed, examined, evaluated. She'd been shopping for something. The question was whether she'd found it. My father's watch was gone from my bedroom dresser, the Omega he'd worn every day for 40 years, the one he'd taken off his wrist and placed in my palm the day before he died. Take care of this, son, and take care of your mother. I sat heavily on the bed, the mattress creaking under my weight. The watch wasn't particularly valuable to anyone else, maybe $300 at a pawn shop, but to me it was priceless, irreplaceable, and Wendy knew that. I walked through the house again, slower this time, cataloging what I'd missed. Small things, mostly. A silver letter opener from the kitchen junk drawer, the good fountain pen from my desk. Sarah's jewelry box had been gone through, though most of the contents were still there. Wendy had taken only what would be easy to sell without questions. She'd been methodical. Professional, almost. This wasn't a desperate grab for quick cash. This was planned, calculated. She'd had time to think about what to take, what would be missed immediately versus what might go unnoticed for weeks. While I'd been fighting for my life, hooked up to machines in a sterile room, my own daughter had been in my home, evaluating my possessions like a burglar. No, like an appraiser, like someone preparing for an estate sale. The thought hit me with sickening clarity. She hadn't just been stealing from me, she'd been preparing, learning what I owned, what it was worth, how to access it. This wasn't about temporary financial help anymore. This was about permanent solutions to her money problems. I made my way back to the kitchen and opened the canister again. Half the emergency money gone, but not all of it. She was being careful, pacing herself, testing how much she could take without triggering suspicion. But I was suspicious now. I was more than suspicious. I reached for my car keys from the hook beside the garage door. Time to have a conversation with my daughter. Time to see how well she could lie to my face when she didn't know I'd already discovered the truth. The drive to Oak Avenue would take 20 minutes. 20 minutes to decide what kind of father I wanted to be when I got there. Wendy's rental house looked shabbier than I remembered. The front yard needed mowing, and the porch steps sagged slightly under their own weight. My own house, the one I'd worked 30 years to pay off, could fit this entire property in its backyard, yet somehow they still needed my money to survive. I parked at the curb and sat for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. Through the front window I could see movement, Wendy walking past in what looked like a nice dress. Not the clothes of someone who'd spent yesterday in crisis over her father's medical emergency. The front door opened before I even reached it. "Dad!" Wendy's face transformed into a mask of concern so perfectly crafted it would have fooled me yesterday. "Oh my goodness, how are you feeling? I'm so sorry I couldn't make it to the hospital right away." "Why couldn't you answer your phone? I called multiple times." She stepped back to let me in, her hand fluttering to her chest in a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when she was caught in childhood lies. "I told the nurse. My phone broke yesterday morning. I dropped it right in the kitchen sink, if you can believe it." The living room was cramped but clean, furnished with pieces that had clearly seen better days. Jasper's design materials were spread across a small table in the corner, but he was nowhere to be seen. "When exactly did your phone break?" I remained standing near the door, noting how she didn't offer me a seat or ask if I wanted coffee. "Around 10, I think. I was doing dishes. Being clumsy as usual." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "You know how I get when I'm stressed about you, Dad." "So you knew I was in the hospital but couldn't come because of a broken phone?" "Well, no, not exactly." Wendy moved to the window, adjusting the curtains unnecessarily. "The nurse called our landline. Did you know we still had one? I completely forgot about it. But by then she said you were stable and resting. I figured you'd want me to take care of practical things here rather than just sit around a hospital room worrying." I watched her face as she spoke, noting the slight flush in her cheeks, the way her eyes didn't quite meet mine. "Since when do you take care of practical things instead of worrying? Last time I had chest pains, you wanted to call an ambulance for heartburn." "That was different," she said quickly. "You know how you sometimes dramatize situations, Dad. I'm learning to assess things more rationally." Dramatize. There was that word again, the same one Jasper had used in his celebration post, the word they'd clearly discussed, planned to use if questioned about their absence during my crisis. "Where's Jasper?" I asked. "Job interview downtown. Finally got a call back from that design firm I mentioned." She moved to the kitchen counter, where I could see a brand new phone still in its packaging. The receipt beside it was time-stamped from this morning at 9:15 a.m. Interesting. Her phone had allegedly broken at 10 yesterday morning, but she'd only replaced it this morning, conveniently after the hospital drama had passed. "Dad, are you okay? You look pale." Wendy approached with what appeared to be genuine concern, but I'd learned to question all her expressions in the past 24 hours. "Just tired. Heart surgery takes it out of you." "Of course it does." She touched my arm briefly, the gesture feeling performative rather than affectionate. "You should probably get home and rest instead of driving around checking on everyone else." Everyone else? As if I made a habit of checking up on people after major medical events. As if this wasn't the first time I'd seen her since the hospital. The first time she'd bothered to look at me since I'd nearly died. "I wanted to make sure you weren't too worried," I said carefully. "I know how family emergencies upset you." "I appreciate that, Dad. I really do. But you know how I am about hospitals. Ever since Mom—" She trailed off, letting the implication hang between us. Using Sarah's death as a shield, just like she'd used it to justify taking my money. "Right," I said. "Well, I should probably get going. Let you get back to your day." Relief flickered across her face, quickly hidden but unmistakable. She wanted me gone. had probably been checking the time since I'd arrived, calculating how long she needed to maintain this performance. "Call me if you need anything," she said, walking me to the door with what seemed like unnecessary speed. "And Dad, try not to worry so much. You know how stress affects your heart." I paused on her front step, looking back at her framed in the doorway. Yesterday I would have seen a loving daughter concerned for her father's health. Today I saw something else entirely. "I'll try to keep the drama to a minimum," I said. Her smile faltered for just a moment. "What?" "Nothing. Just something someone said." I turned toward my car, feeling her eyes on my back, until I heard the front door close with a soft, final click. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of her in my rearview mirror, already pulling out her new phone. Probably texting Jasper that the old man had bought her story, that the crisis had passed. But the crisis had only just begun. The drive home felt longer than usual, every red light giving me another moment to replay Wendy's performance. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for several minutes, engine ticking as it cooled, watching the afternoon shadows stretch across my lawn. My chest still ached. Whether from the heart attack or from something deeper, I couldn't tell anymore. Getting out of the car required more effort than it should have. The medication made me feel disconnected from my own body, like I was operating heavy machinery I didn't fully understand. I fumbled with my keys, muscle memory guiding me toward the front door. "Hiram!" Jacqueline Garza's voice carried across the narrow strip of grass between our driveways. She was hurrying over from her front yard, where she'd clearly been waiting for my return. At 50, Jacqueline had the kind of restless energy that made her the unofficial neighborhood news service. "Thank goodness you're all right. When I heard about the hospital, I was so worried." "You heard about that?" I turned to face her, noting the eager gleam in her eyes that always appeared when she had information to share. "Well, your Wendy's been telling everyone about your heart attack." Jacqueline's expression shifted slightly, as if she was choosing her words carefully. She seemed, well, not as worried as I'd expect a daughter to be. Something cold settled in my stomach. What exactly has she been saying? "Oh, honey, I probably shouldn't repeat neighborhood gossip, but..." She glanced around as if checking for eavesdroppers, then leaned closer. "She and that husband of hers have been talking about how your heart is failing, how you probably don't have much time left." The keys bit into my palm, where I was gripping them too tightly. "They said that?" Not in so many words, but the implication was clear. "And Hiram..." Jacqueline's voice dropped to what she probably thought was a whisper. "They've even been discussing what they'll do with this beautiful house when they inherit it. Planning changes, talking about selling it for the lot value. I thought it was terribly premature, but Jasper said something about your weak ticker, making it a matter of when, not if." The world seemed to tilt slightly. I reached out and gripped the car's doorframe, steadying myself against more than just physical weakness. "When did you hear this?" "Just yesterday morning, actually. I was getting my mail when they walked by, taking their usual stroll through the neighborhood. You know how they like to look at the nicer houses. They were discussing square footage and property values, like they were already measuring for furniture. Yesterday morning, while I was unconscious in a hospital bed, fighting for my life, my daughter and son-in-law had been taking inventory walks through my neighborhood, planning my estate sale. I hope I haven't upset you," Jacqueline continued, clearly recognizing that something was wrong with my expression. "I just thought it was odd timing, you know. Most children would be focused on their parents' recovery, not, well, other things. No, I appreciate you telling me." The words felt like they were coming from someone else's mouth. I should probably get inside and rest. "Of course. You look exhausted, poor thing. Let me know if you need anything. Groceries, rides to appointments, anything at all." She patted my arm with genuine kindness, completely unaware that she'd just delivered the final blow to whatever remained of my relationship with my daughter. I managed to wave goodbye and walk toward my front door without stumbling. Behind me, I heard Jacqueline's footsteps returning to her own yard, probably already composing the story she'd tell her next victim about how pale and shaken Hiram Little had looked when she'd shared the neighborhood news. The key turned easily in the lock, but everything beyond that simple action felt impossibly complex. I stepped into my house, The house Wendy and Jasper had already parceled out in their minds, the house they'd discussed selling before my body was even cold, and closed the door behind me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I was truly alone with the complete picture of my daughter's betrayal. And for the first time in my 68 years, I understood exactly what needed to be done. By 8 that evening, I'd moved through my house like a ghost haunting his own life. The half-eaten sandwich on my kitchen counter had grown stale, but I couldn't summon any interest in food. Every room held evidence of the sacrifices I'd made, the love I'd given, the trust that had been systematically exploited and betrayed. Sarah's portrait smiled down from the mantelpiece, the same gentle expression that had comforted me through 3 years of widowhood. What would she think of our daughter now? What would she say about the woman Wendy had become, or perhaps had always been beneath the surface? I remembered Sarah's words from Wendy's wedding day. "She's beautiful, isn't she? But Hiram, promise me you'll be careful. Sometimes I worry that she sees kindness as weakness, generosity as stupidity." I'd laughed it off then. Sarah was just being protective, maybe a little jealous of sharing our daughter with Jasper. But Sarah had seen something I'd missed, some fundamental coldness that I'd explained away as independence, strength, modern thinking. The college tuition I'd paid when my retirement account took its biggest hit. The wedding expenses when Sarah was already sick and medical bills were mounting. The endless stream of emergencies that required immediate financial intervention. Each time, Wendy had made it seem like I was the hero, the savior, the irreplaceable father who always came through. But I wasn't irreplaceable at all. I was just useful, a walking ATM with a sentimental streak and a weak heart. Moving to the window, I looked out toward Oak Avenue, though I couldn't see Wendy's rental house from here. She was probably there right now, maybe on the phone with Jasper, discussing how suspicious I'd seemed during our conversation. Were they worried that I'd figured something out? Or did they assume I was still the same naive fool who'd been bankrolling their lives for years? The neighborhood gossip Jacqueline had shared played on repeat in my mind. Planning changes to my house, discussing property values, calling my heart a weak ticker, and debating when, not if, it would finally give out completely. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were counting on it, planning for it, depending on it to solve their financial problems permanently. I walked to my study and pulled out the filing cabinet, where I kept important documents: house deed, insurance policies, investment statements, all the papers that represented a lifetime of work, saving, and careful planning. All the assets that Wendy assumed would flow to her like some inevitable inheritance. But inheritance required death, and despite what my daughter and son-in-law might have hoped, I wasn't dead yet. Sitting back in my leather chair, I felt something shift inside my chest. Not physical pain this time, but something harder and colder, settling where trust and love used to live. If Wendy could be practical about my death, I could be practical about my life. She'd taught me the rules of this new game we were playing. Money was more important than love. Planning was more important than grief. Self-interest trumped family loyalty every single time. Fine. I was a quick learner, especially when the lesson involved engineering problems. And this was ultimately an engineering problem: how to redistribute resources in a way that achieved the desired outcome. The desired outcome was justice. The resources were everything I'd worked for, everything I'd saved, everything Wendy assumed would be hers to inherit. Outside, night had fallen completely. The house felt different now, less like a home and more like a tool, the most valuable tool in my arsenal for teaching my daughter that some assumptions come with a price. I pulled out my address book, the old-fashioned kind with handwritten entries and smudged phone numbers. Silas Burton's information was right where I'd written it, 15 years ago, complete with his home and office numbers. Tomorrow morning I'd make a call that would change everything. Tonight I'd sleep better than I had in years, knowing that for once in this relationship I'd be the one setting the terms. Wendy wanted to plan my funeral. Instead, she was about to attend the burial of her financial future. Saturday morning came with unexpected clarity. I'd slept 7 solid hours, more than I'd managed since Sarah died. No anxiety dreams, no chest pains in the middle of the night, just the deep, restful sleep of a man who'd finally stopped fighting against the truth. Coffee tasted better than it had in days. Even the simple act of buttering toast felt purposeful rather than mechanical. I was moving through my morning routine with the focused efficiency of someone preparing for an important meeting, because that's exactly what I was doing. Silas Burton's business card sat propped against the sugar bowl where I'd placed it the night before. He'd been after me to sell this house for the better part of a decade, always with the same argument. Too much space for one person, too much maintenance, too much equity sitting dormant when I could be liquid and mobile. I'd always said no, of course. This was the house where Sarah and I had built our life together, where Wendy had taken her first steps, where Christmas mornings had echoed with laughter and wrapping paper. You don't sell memories, but memories weren't paying for Wendy's cocktails while I fought for my life. Memories weren't funding her shopping trips through my neighborhood, calculating property values. Memories weren't protecting me from my own daughter's greed. At exactly 9 o'clock, I dialed Silas's home number. Burton residence. His voice was crisp, professional even on Saturday morning. Silas, it's Hiram Little. I hope I'm not calling too early. Hiram! The warmth in his voice was immediate and genuine. Never too early for an old friend. How are you feeling? I heard through the grapevine about your hospital stay. I'm recovering well, thanks. Actually, that's part of why I'm calling. I took a steadying breath. Remember how you've been telling me to sell this house? A pause. Then, for about 10 years running, yes. Are you finally ready to listen to reason and downsize? Something like that. How quickly could you move on a sale if I were serious about it? In this market, Hiram, I could have 3 families bidding against each other by Tuesday. Your neighborhood is gold right now. Young professionals moving out from the city center, families wanting established areas with character. His excitement was building with each word. But are you sure about this? It's a major decision. I'm sure. I need cash, Silas. How fast can you make that happen? Cash sale? Well, that depends on the buyer, but I know investors who could close within a week if the property's clean, which yours absolutely is. I've been watching you maintain that place like a museum piece for decades. He paused, and I could almost hear him shifting into business mode. What kind of timeline are we talking about here? 1 week, maybe less if possible. Hiram, what's the urgency? If you don't mind me asking. Usually when someone wants to sell their family home that quickly. Let's just say I've had some revelations about family priorities lately. I want to make sure my assets go where they'll do the most good while I'm still alive to see it happen. Ah, Silas's tone suggested he understood more than I was saying. Well, you won't get any arguments from me about that philosophy. And frankly, you're sitting on a gold mine. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, that beautiful original hardwood, the mature landscaping. In this market, we're talking serious money. How serious? Ballpark, 400,000, maybe 450 if we get a bidding war. The lot alone is worth nearly half that much. Developers are snapping up properties in your area. $400,000. More than enough to disappear completely, to start over somewhere Wendy would never think to look. More than enough to ensure that her inheritance plans became academic rather than practical. When can we get started? I asked. I can be over this afternoon with the paperwork. We'll need photos, a professional assessment, maybe some minor staging recommendations. But Hiram, once we list this thing, there's no backing out. The market moves fast. I'm counting on it. All right, then. This is exciting, friend. You're going to love the freedom that comes with cutting loose from all that responsibility. Where are you thinking of relocating? I looked around my kitchen, at the window where I'd watched Sarah tend her garden, at the breakfast nook where Wendy used to eat cereal before school. In a week, none of it would be mine anymore. In a week, Wendy's inheritance would evaporate like morning fog. I haven't decided yet, I said, but somewhere far enough away to start fresh. Perfect. I'll see you at 2 o'clock sharp. And Hiram, you're doing the right thing. Life's too short to be tied down by property when you could be out there living it. After I hung up, I sat perfectly still for several minutes, listening to the house settle around me. Somewhere across town, Wendy was probably planning her day, maybe discussing with Jasper how long they'd have to wait for their windfall, maybe calculating monthly payments on the debt they'd run up in anticipation of my death. They were about to learn that anticipation and reality were 2 very different things. At 2 o'clock, my house would officially go on the market. By next weekend, it would belong to someone else entirely. And by then, I'd be gone. Not dead, as my daughter had hoped, but free in a way I hadn't been since I'd first decided that being a good father meant being a foolish one. The phone rang in my hand, startling me back to the present. Wendy's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring. The week that followed my call to Silas moved with the precision of a well-engineered machine. Monday brought document signings at his office. Tuesday saw the first showing, and by Wednesday we had serious buyers. The Stanleys, Waldo and Lori, with their 4-year-old daughter Emma, fell in love with the house the moment they walked through the front door. "Mr. Little, this house has been so beautifully maintained," Waldo said, running his hand along the original crown molding in the living room. His wife was already in the kitchen, opening cabinets and admiring the vintage tile work Sarah had chosen 20 years ago. "You can tell it's been truly loved," Lori added, peering out the window at the backyard where Emma was already spinning in circles on the grass. "Emma would have so much space to play here. Room for a swing set, maybe a garden." I watched the little girl through the window, remembering when Wendy had been that age, when she'd played in that same yard with the same innocent joy, before money became more important than love, before manipulation became second nature. "The neighborhood is perfect for families," I told them. "Good schools, quiet streets, neighbors who actually care about each other." The inspection on Thursday revealed minor issues: a loose shutter, some weather stripping that needed replacing, nothing that would slow down the process. By Friday, we were sitting in the closing attorney's office, signing papers that would transfer ownership of my family home to people who deserved it. Silas handled the technical details with his usual efficiency, but I caught him watching me with concern during the more emotional moments. When the attorney slid the cashier's check across the table, $435,000, more than I'd ever imagined the house was worth, my hand was steady as I accepted it. "I've never seen a sale move this smoothly," Silas murmured as we gathered the papers. "Are you absolutely certain about this decision?" "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." The key ceremony took place on the front porch, with Emma dancing around her parents' legs while I handed over the house keys. Such a simple gesture. Metal changing hands, but it represented the complete transformation of my life. "We'll take wonderful care of it," Lori promised, accepting the keys with both hands like they were made of crystal. "I know you will," I said, and meant it. "This house deserves to hear children's laughter again." Later, after the Stanleys had driven away to begin planning their move, I stood alone on the sidewalk, looking at the house that was no longer mine. The late afternoon sun caught the windows just right, making them glow like warm amber. Sarah would understand this decision. She'd always said that houses were meant for living, not just existing. My phone buzzed with a text from the hotel where I'd been staying. "Room confirmed for another week while you finalize relocation plans." Perfect. By the time Wendy discovered what had happened, I'd be long gone. By the time she realized her inheritance had evaporated, I'd already be building a new life, somewhere she'd never think to look. I got into my car, the same car I'd driven to the hospital 8 days ago as a naive father who trusted his daughter's love. The man driving away from Elm Street was someone entirely different, someone who'd learned that sometimes the only way to win the game is to change the rules completely. In my rearview mirror, I watched the Stanleys' car pull up to their new home, Emma's excited face pressed against the window. The future belonged to families like theirs, honest, hopeful, genuinely caring about each other. The past, with all its lies and manipulations and calculated betrayals, belonged to someone else now. Sunday morning arrived with unseasonable clarity, the kind of bright sky that makes everything look sharper than usual. I was finishing coffee in my hotel room when the phone rang. Wendy's name on the screen made me smile for the first time in over a week. "Dad." Her voice was tight, controlled, dangerous. "We need to talk. Right now." "Good morning to you too, sweetheart. How can I help you?" "Don't play games with me. I just drove by the house. There are strangers in our yard, Dad. Strangers with moving trucks and children's toys. What did you do?" "I sold it. Yesterday, actually. Lovely family, the Stanleys. They'll take much better care of it than—" "You sold our house? Without telling me?" without discussing it with family? Her voice was climbing toward hysteria, each word sharper than the last. My house, Wendy? My name was on the deed. And yes, I sold it. For quite a bit more than I expected thanks to the market. Meet me there, right now. We're going to fix this. 20 minutes later, I parked across the street from my former home and watched the scene unfold. Wendy was on the front lawn, gesturing frantically at Waldo Stanley, while his wife held Emma protectively behind her. Even from a distance, I could see the confusion on their faces, the way they kept looking toward their new house, as if questioning their own right to be there. I crossed the street with measured steps, my heart rate steady for the first time in days. Wendy, my voice cut through her tirade, step away from these nice people. She spun toward me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in my daughter's face. Pure, undiluted rage mixed with genuine fear. Dad, tell them this is a mistake. Tell them you're not competent to make these decisions. Tell them... Mr. Little? Waldo stepped forward, his arm around his wife's shoulders. Is there some kind of problem we should know about? No problem at all, I said calmly. Just a family disagreement. My daughter seems to have forgotten that children don't inherit property until their parents are actually dead. Wendy's face went white. You can't do this to us. We had plans. We were counting on... On my death? Yes, I heard about your plans. Jacqueline mentioned how you and Jasper were discussing my timeline with the neighbors. Something about my weak ticker and property values? She opened her mouth, then closed it, the calculation visible in her eyes as she tried to find a new angle of attack. We're going inside, Lori Stanley said quietly to her husband. Emma, come on, honey. They disappeared through the front door that had been mine yesterday morning, leaving Wendy and me alone on the sidewalk. You don't understand the pressure we're under, she started, but I held up my hand. Stop. Just stop. I looked at this woman who shared my blood, who'd once been my greatest joy, who'd systematically betrayed every kindness I'd ever shown her. I saw Jasper's post, Wendy. While I was in the hospital fighting for my life, he was celebrating a day without the drama king. You told the hospital you were too busy to come, too busy to check on your dying father. Her mouth worked soundlessly for a moment. You're twisting everything. You're being... dramatic? I smiled and she flinched. That seems to be your favorite word for me lately. Well, here's some drama for you. I'm alive, I'm healthy, and I'm not waiting around for your inheritance timeline anymore. You can't just cut us out. I'm your daughter. You cut yourself out the moment you decided my death was more valuable than my life. I turned toward my car, then paused. Oh, and Wendy, next time you plan someone's funeral, make sure they're actually dead first. She stood there on the sidewalk that was no longer hers, in front of the house that would never be hers, looking smaller and more powerless than I'd ever seen her. No more manipulation, no more crocodile tears, no more emotional blackmail using her mother's memory, just a greedy woman who'd gambled everything on her father's weakness and lost. I drove away without looking back, leaving her to explain to Jasper how their foolproof inheritance plan had just evaporated in the spring sunshine. 3 months later, I sat in my Cincinnati apartment, watching the Ohio River flow past my window, coffee growing cold in my hands, as I considered the strange turns life can take. The place was smaller than my old house, but infinitely more peaceful. Modern, efficient, mine by choice rather than by accident of marriage and parenthood. The calendar on my kitchen counter showed June 15th. Wendy's 36th birthday. I'd kept this tradition for 36 years, calling her every birthday morning, usually to arrange dinner or a gift exchange. This year felt different. This year the call was about maintaining boundaries, rather than expressing love. She answered on the 4th ring. Hello, Dad. Her voice was carefully neutral, professionally polite. We'd spoken twice since the house sale, once when she'd tried bringing Jasper to guilt me into doing the right thing, and once when she'd called crying about their financial struggles. Both conversations had been brief. Happy birthday, Wendy. Thank you. How are you managing? A pause. Then, we're fine. No thanks to you. I'm glad to hear you're doing well. I meant it, surprisingly. I won't keep you long. I know you're busy. Dad. She started to say something, then seemed to think better of it. Is that all? I looked around my apartment, at the books I was reading for pleasure instead of necessity. at the fishing gear I'd bought for weekend trips to the lake, at the absence of family photos that had once cluttered every surface. Peace looked different than I'd expected, but it felt exactly right. "Just one more thing," I said. "Try not to be so dramatic, sweetheart." Silence stretched across the line for nearly 10 seconds. Then she hung up without saying goodbye. I set the phone down and returned to my coffee, which had somehow stayed warmer than expected. Through the window, a young family was walking along the riverside path, parents pushing a stroller, older child running ahead with a kite. They looked happy in the uncomplicated way that Wendy and I had never quite managed. The drama king had abdicated, I thought, watching the kite catch the wind and soar higher. Long live the quiet king. For the first time in 68 years, I was exactly where I chose to be, with exactly the people I chose to have in my life. The inheritance Wendy had planned on was gone, but she'd inadvertently given me something far more valuable: the knowledge that I didn't need to be anyone's victim, not even my own daughter's. I picked up the newspaper and turned to the crossword puzzle, humming softly to myself. Outside, the river kept flowing toward whatever came next, carrying away everything that no longer served the journey. Sometimes the only way to save a relationship is to end it. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to succeed or fail on their own merits. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you discover that the life you thought was ending was actually just beginning. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.